Let me just remind folks that this is being recorded, and you probably want to mute yourself if you're not talking so that we don't have chatter in the background on the recording. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to give a brief interview of how it's working, and then I'm going to do a fresh install and show people how the interface works and introduction to what this does. So basically my motivations for this were driven by the IMO cybersecurity reporting requirements we had to do. And so I needed a quick way to collect host, operating system, and software installed data on systems. And so I wrote this tool to do that for us on Sikuliaq, but I kind of generalized it as much as I could. But it's a quick and dirty tool. But it is cross-platform, so it supports all three major operating systems there. It's non-invasive, so it doesn't require root access to install or run. It's non-intrusive, so it's really easy to uninstall by just deleting a directory. And it has minimal dependencies, so it tries to use data collection tools that are available in the native OSs instead of having to install a bunch of other packages. And it can be run on embedded networks without an internet connection. So you can put it on an embedded network and collect data on hosts. It doesn't require internet access for them. I did work with our intellectual property office at UAF to open source this. So we have released it under an ISC open source license, which is a non-restrictive license that allows you to clone it, copy it, do whatever you want with it. Okay, and feel free to ask questions and join in anytime. I don't mind interruptions. So with that said, we have the main site here, which I think the link was provided, is www.sikuliaq.alaska.edu/get/skq/skq-itam. And why don't I just copy that and put it in the chat? That's probably a lot easier. So this
Genius.
is the main site if you would like to pull up this page and clone it from here. If you're familiar with Git cloning, if not, we can cover that. Here is the demo site that's running, and it runs on port 8411. And I'll put that in the chat there too. So you're welcome to pull that up. And when you load this site, what you get is some links. And we'll go over how this works with the client, but basically you can copy these links and paste them into a terminal on Windows, Mac, or Linux systems, and it'll run the client and then send that data straight back to the server that you've set up. So in this case, you can see the URL is tied to the scici.org site, which is just a test site I have. Okay, so from this web interface, you can go to stats, and once data has been populated for some nodes, we can see I've got 14 hosts total. And here's the breakdown of the test systems I have. So I've got 3 Windows, 1 Mac, and 10 Linux. We can see the distribution of operating system versions across Debian GNU Linux, Linux Mint, Mac OS, a couple of different Windows versions, and Raspberry Pis, and an Ubuntu system. I'm going to turn off this auto refresh app I've got. So we can see the install dates. So there were 9 systems installed in 2021, 4 in 2020, and 1 in 2019. So we get a distribution of how old they are from the OS installation date. And then it does the metric I kind of invented for it to tell us how up-to-date systems are, and it's done on a per application basis and on a per host basis. And the way it works is it gets a list of the packages that are installed on every system and the versions, and so it compares your version with the most up-to-date version known of all the systems you have. So it doesn't go out to the vendor and find the latest version. That's a hard problem. The easy problem is to just put say a Windows system on, install the software you want, and run updates, and you get the latest up. So you have at least one up-to-date system, whether it's Linux, Mac, or Windows, and then everything else will be compared relative to the most up-to-date system. So that was the quick and easy thing to do. And so this gives me scores of all the applications I've got. You know, majority of them are up to date. 2,916 are up to date out of the 3,000 some, I guess we have. Of the hosts, I'm giving a score of about 0.8 out of 1. 1 would be, you know, great and excellent. And then I've got some really old out-of-date systems down here.
Hey, John, quick question.
Yes, absolutely.
If you had an 1804 Ubuntu system and you said apt-get update, apt-get upgrade, what would the score be?
So the score is based off of any application anywhere. So if you have, so it might be the most up to date for that Linux distribution. But if you've got, say, a Debian 11 system, which is, you know, very up to date, the packages that it have might be higher versions than that one. So that's going to lower the score of the older distributions that you have, because they're not the most up to date versions. It might be the most up to date for that distribution, but not the most up to date version of that software available. Does that answer your question?
It does. It sounds, because we have to run a server of ours through some tester thing, and it sounds like that's the same thing they're doing.
Yeah. So I would interpret this information as, you know, put your thumb in the air, get a taste for how up to date my systems are. I would not consider it authoritative by any stretch of the imagination. It's just trying to give me some idea of where how, you know, if I see a bunch of stuff in the red, maybe I've got a lot of really out of date systems. And it's relative, so it's not absolute in terms of things being up to date. If you click on the Assets tab, you can get more detailed information for each system. So these are each of the systems. Each system gets given a cryptographic generated ID. So it's called the ITAM, IT Asset Manager ID. And it's a cryptographic hash that's supposed to be unique for each and every system. There's one caveat. If you clone VMs and you don't seal them, you can wind up with the same ID. And then it doesn't identify them as different systems. When you run it, you get the same information. And so that I've run into that problem. So there are a number of bugs and features that could be added here.
Thanks for mentioning that.
Yep. So that, I mean, if that becomes a bigger problem, I can show you how to, on Linux, it's working fine. On Windows, I'm having trouble with it. So it's a known feature problem. In fact, I've noted it here down under, it's not under caveats. I think, where did I put it? Well, I have an errata somewhere. It's listed in there. I can't remember where I put that. Maybe I'll find it later. So while I'm at caveats, I will mention this. When you install this, it runs on port 8411, but it's not SSL, and there's no administrative login to prompt for. So generally, I don't advise running this on the internet like we're doing today. We're doing that safely, but when we're done, I'm going to blow it away. But you know, anybody on the internet can come to this site right now and get this metadata and find out what versions of software are installed on these hosts. And it doesn't collect anything that I consider terribly sensitive. The most sensitive thing is that it tells you what versions of what software are installed. And if you know exploits there, then you know, hey, that system's got a weakness I could exploit. So that would be the big risk. But in general, I wouldn't do that. Do it open on the internet. I would restrict it right now. Generally on an internal network, that's not as big of an issue. Okay, so that said, you can kind of see metadata here. You can do searches for things like, you know, Pi, and I can find my Raspberry Pis, and it tells me the, you know, the hardware version model number, and then it's telling me that it thinks these are out of date. So these are the out of date scores of the packages installed for those Pis. So you can see the version metadata. You can see the RAM, the CPU, and the interfaces. One thing it does not collect is disk information yet. I don't have that information. I haven't found an easy way to add that yet. Okay, so that's under assets. So we did stats and assets. If you go to data, you can get, for example, if I go to the device inventory, I'm going to open that in a new tab. I can get a list of all the metadata for all the hosts that I have, the operating systems, in JSON format. So you could write and you could query this API with some other tool and integrate it with something fairly easily. You can also do the same for software inventory, but it is so big because there's so many packages for every host. It tends to get complicated. It's very slow sometimes. So let's see, what did I do? I have I have it over here. I have an example of what that looks like preloaded. So this is on a different, this is another internal instance I have running, but you can see it shows the ID of the host and it associates all the packages in there. And then if you break those out, you can see some information about, where it came from, what the install date was here. So this is the software package information on that particular host. And then if I shrink that up, I could break it out for a Windows hosts and get information about stuff installed there and so on. So the ID is associated with the unique ID of each of the guests. But that's what the software API looks like. I'm not going to do that here because it's running very slow right now. This is broken. The software download as a CSV file is broken, but you can download your device inventory as a CSV file. And so I can get the same information, I think, by opening up in LibreOffice, I believe. Let's see if it's going to open. There we go. And then I just import it. Looks like I did it twice. And so you can get your metadata into a spreadsheet. I think that spreadsheet's a little big there for this window. Let me get it into the, there we go. But you get the idea. So you can have access, direct access to that data in CSV and do whatever you want with it as well. Okay. Any questions so far? So the other thing that it does generate is these very custom Appendix D hardware and software reports. So as part of the Appendix D cybersecurity reporting we had to do, those are custom reports I generated, so I could just copy and paste them right into the spreadsheet that our cybersecurity folks wanted. So that was very customized for those needs. So I added the custom reports there. What I want to do is actually modularize this so you can add software modules to do other custom reports or other custom queries even. Like, if you have a very specialized set of data you want to query and add to the data set, it could add that modularly. I haven't done that yet. Okay, so there is an API. And so if you go to the URL of the scici.org site and you put on the end of it API, I'll get to I mentioned that's actually what the JSON is querying. It's querying the API there from the link, but there is a general one that you can go to, which I'll put in chat. And this API shows you just general configuration data of the server that's running. So there's some metadata of the configuration of the server side, basically, is what that's showing. Not terribly interesting, but somewhat useful. But the API is done with something called Node Express. And so if we were into the code base, we could look at how that's done. And it's easy to extend if you want to add other APIs to serve out other data. Okay, so that is a pretty good summary of everything we've got and what you can get out of it once it's populated. So now what I want to do is go blow this away and recreate it and start over from scratch. Show folks how it's going to work. Is anybody here interested in installing it on systems they have?
Obi?
I already installed it.
So if you've already installed it and you're ready to go, you've already. Oh yeah, I should mention. I forgot to do this. There is a video on the main site. It's up on YouTube. If you watch that video, it walks through everything I'm going to do here today. So you can click on this video and you can then you can log off this Zoom session and you can go back to other things and watch it when you want. But in theory, that video it's about 20 minutes and it walks through everything we're going to do. Okay, so with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my server side and I'm going to stop it. And I'm going to get out of that directory. let me stop this and get back out. And then we'll walk through an install. So can folks see my terminal window okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I have this is the previous install I did. So what I'm just going to do to uninstall it, and let's just verify that the site's not working. So if I try to reload this, I should get an error. It's broken now. So what I'm going to do is just move that directory to a .try1, or just rename it basically, so it's not there anymore. And I'm logged into that SciCI server, so it's a DigitalOcean site that I'm running. So I'll come up to the top of the website, and I'm going to copy the link and come here and say git clone the website, and I can copy and paste that into the chat if anybody wants it. And so we'll git clone it. And I think I have these installed directions here on the site too. So installation, we're just going to walk through this setup. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is CD. So that cloned the directory, and I now have the SKQ IT AM directory. We're going to CD into that, and I'm going to run the setup script, server setup. I just run it. And it'll go out and grab, this does need internet access, so it's going to go out and grab a bunch of different versions of Node.js and all the dependencies that it needs, and it does an npm install. So at this point, I should be ready to go run the server startup. So /server setup, or whoops, well, I'm rerunning the server setup. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to run the startup. But you can run the server setup multiple times. It's idempotent, so you can rerun it, and it's not going to hurt anything. This is a Debian Linux system. This should work actually on pretty much any Linux. It should work on Raspberry Pis. It should work on CentOS or other Linux-based systems. I haven't tried it on a bunch of others, but there's nothing really dependent on Debian here. Okay, so it's telling us the web UI is here by IP, but I should be able to go back to here now and reload, and I get the web interface. So it's got some error. Oh, it's trying to get the stats. That doesn't exist yet because we haven't populated anything. So for example, now I've started it. If I go to stats, I'm just going to get an empty web page because I don't have any data there yet. So I have to do something to get that. So let me split my screen. Let's go run the client here. So Linux, I'm going to run the client on the server, and we'll get the server data. So I'm going to copy that command, come over here and paste it. And it's going out and collecting data. It gives us a little metadata on the client, and it's running, and it's basically analyzing all the apt packages that it has right now on the client side. And when it's done, it'll send that data to the server. All right, so if I come to the stats site, I still don't get any data. And that is because we haven't analyzed it yet. So to do that, I have to go into the directory again, and there's this analyze script that I have to run. There's a script here that will run it, a shell script. And so what I'm going to do is just run that analyze script, and it goes through and processes the data it has. And now if I reload this, I should get that we have one Linux system, and it's GNU Debian 10. And I've got some data now for at least one host. So if you want, what you can do is you can go to scici.org/8411, and you can go find the link for your system. On Linux, it works with curl or wget. For Macs, you can use curl. And so I've got an example of a Mac here. So I could go click this link, come over to my Mac, and paste it in at the terminal, and go run it, and it'll go out and grab it and update the Mac. And in some cases, some Debian systems, I've seen it take a half hour. Other systems are very quick like this took 5 seconds to run. But now I have to go run my analyze script again on the server side. And now if I come to assets, I'll see that I've got 1 Mac and 1 Linux system. I'm going to do a Windows system here as well. I've got a test Windows box, and I've already copied it, and I'm going to run it, and it should go out and collect the data for the Windows system. There it goes. So Windows runs a PowerShell script, and it goes out. But effectively, once it gets the Node.js client installed, it's the same client for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's cross-platform. It just has to build the back end in. And I don't think that would take too long to run. We'll see how long it takes. Yep, 3 seconds. All right, not too bad. So again, I come over here and run the analyze script. Oops, something didn't like something. Unterminated group, regular expression. Oh, somebody has loaded a system that's breaking something because I have a bug. Chris's MacBook Pro has broken my script.
I thought you told us to run it.
I did. Yeah. Well, this is good to know. That's okay. I'm glad to know that that's breaking it. So I can fix it. I can fix it here. This is a good thing. Because one, I know I've got something broken and I've got metadata I can use to go figure out why and fix it. But I'll show you where all the data is. There's this ITAM data directory, tree ITAM data. And so under hosts, I can see all the metadata and the JSON files for each of those. So I can pull up the raw data. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just move hosts. Let's see, where is ITAM data, hosts, Chris, and I'll move that to here just to get it out of the way. Then go back to my,
I'll sit on my hands.
There we go. I'll rerun it, and now I'm not broken anymore. No, this is the problem, is there's nuances with every different OS that can break my assumptions. And so now I have to go through and figure each of those out. So I do need a wide distribution of things to test with it. So I appreciate it, Chris. Thank you. But now you can see I've got metadata for each of these systems. If I go to data, or not data, I want to go to stats. We can see the installation by year, and we can see the number, or how out of date they are. And because they're the only versions they have of themselves, they think they're pretty up to date. As we add other hosts, we can see that they'll start to see a spread there. But if other people want to go ahead and try loading your OSs, we might find some others that are problematic. Would be good to know. But that is pretty much it for installation. That's how it works. You can install the server on a Raspberry Pi and a VM on pretty much any Linux system, and it'll work. It technically should work on Windows, Mac, or Linux. I haven't tried it. The setup scripts won't work on probably Mac or Windows, so I would have to write custom setup scripts. But the Node.js server that's running is platform independent and should run on any platform. So if there's a real demand to run the server on platforms other than Linux, it could be done. All right. So I'll take questions or comments or other testing, or I could go load a bunch of other hosts here if folks want, just to get some more data.
I'm giving it a shot.
Yep. And I'm going to delete this data when we're done. So anything that we collect about your systems, we won't keep in perpetuity. I'll blow it away.
John, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How fixed is your branding here? So for instance, if you wanted to run it on another vessel,
Great question.
and
Yep.
maintain who wrote it, but make it look like it was, you know, talking about this specific vessel.
It's not fixed at all. So it can be changed. I haven't documented how to do that, but this site is written in something called mkdocs. And so I can show you where that would be done. So this is the code base for it. So if you clone the repository, you'll get this, and I'm using Atom Editor here for this. But if you go under web root, the doc site, there's this custom folder, and there's a base HTML, and this base HTML, like here's the banner. So that Sikuliaq banner that you're seeing up here at the top, that code is defined right there. So you could come in and change this HTML code to create a custom banner. There's also some CSS in here. I think I'd have to go back and revisit, but I could work with you on that. We could go identify where the colors are defined. There's also the footer is defined in this file. So if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a custom footer down here.
Yeah.
And so
It
that's
looks like you have a UAF CSS. I wonder if that's where you're.
Yeah, there's some of these are used and some aren't. So what I could do is go inspect element on the website, and if I pull that to win, for example, we could click here. Oh no, I need to go to network. Sorry, bear with me. All right,
I think the banner is really the key. I mean, all of the accreditation is important. I wouldn't be inclined to change that.
So once you do that, then you can rebuild the mkdocs site, and it's not hard to do, but I don't know if I'm prepared to. Well, I can show you what it looks like. I don't know if maybe I can test it. Let's see. But the question was, where's the CSS? And can I sort by type? I'm not seeing it. It's there somewhere. All right, well, my eyeballs are not seeing it, and I don't remember, but I know it's in there somewhere. But yeah, you can do custom CSS if you want to change the look and feel of it. You just have to play with it. But mkdocs is a Python-based site builder, static site builder. So if anybody's interested in that, it's fairly easy to get started with. You just have to install it for your system. And let me see if I am so inclined. This is my code directory. Let's see, I'll make this a little bigger for those who have smaller screens. And I'll show you what a site build looks like. So when I would go in, if I want to go in and edit that code, what I would do is I would go to that web directory root. So you want to be in the directory that has this mkdocs YAML file. And I'll show you what that looks like real quick. YAML. So it defines the site. So for example, the menu system for the stats, assets, data, the about information, that the nav menu is here. There's a number of JavaScripts and CSSs included. Well, yeah, so I can probably tell UAF is getting loaded, CFOS is getting loaded. So that's probably where the CSS is. And so this tells the site what to load, gives it the version information, other metadata. You can edit this, and then what you simply do is say mkdocs. Once I have the mkdocs tool installed, build, and then I do a clean site, and it will go through and it will rebuild that website And where it places it is in a site directory. So there's this site directory. If I take a look at that, it should have an index.html, and the entire website is located here. And so that is really kind of cool, actually. It's a really cool site builder if you learn how to use it. And I've done a lot of custom tweaks to it for this. But yeah, so that's the gist of what you would go through to edit the skinning of it. It can be done. That's like documentation that should be added if you want to do custom theming or something like that. But it's not at all tied. It certainly can be changed. All right, let's go see what it looks like. I've got a few more here. Let's run our analyzer again. I ran a few clients to get a little more data. There we go. We got 5 hosts now, a couple Raspberry Pis, and 3 of the others. So it gives us a little more distribution of data, but you get the gist. I had pre-populated the other one to have a better example when we started. Okay. Any other questions?
John, I might have missed it. Does the on the client, or like the agent that you install, does it run periodically, or
for this analyzer?
Yeah.
It doesn't,
No.
but this is what I do. So this is a great question. What I do is put it in a while loop. And so that I can run it every, say, 120 seconds or 30 seconds or 60 seconds. And I just run it, and I just let it run in a loop. So this is more to the point. So I'm also running this inside a screen session. I'm running the server in this window down here, and I'm running the analyzer up here. I could easily turn that into a cron job, but what I really need to do is write a system D setup script so you can start it and stop it as a service. And I know how to do that. I just haven't taken the time to do it. So that's one of the things I would like to add, is the ability to just have that, so that when your system boots, it can automatically boot and start it up on boot. But that hasn't been done yet. So right now I just do it manually. And so is another thing on that note. So right now you have to go run this manually on the clients. But the other thing that we could do is set it up so that it gets installed on the system and then maybe runs out of a cron job or something like that periodically to keep your clients up to date, so that your clients constantly check in. So one of the things you can do, let me pull up my other data. Let me see if I can find out what I did with that window. Well, I don't see it now. Maybe I closed it. Nope, here it is. Okay, so if I go to assets, one of the things I can see is under this an inventory column, I can see this was inventoried 4 days ago. And so I can kind of get a gist of how old the data is here. So this one was done 1 day ago. And so as I can see how recently an item checked in. So adding the ability for clients to automatically run the updater maybe once a day. And so as they continually get updated, we'll kind of see their status. I think that would be a good feature to have as well, to kind of automate the client setup. Right now, as I mentioned, the client does need to run as a non-administrative user. And I forgot to mention one thing. When you run it on a Linux client, there's one piece that you can run as sudo if you want. It's this dmidecode script. If I go run that, what it will do is it will dump data here about the motherboard for that system. So if it has it, and in this case, it doesn't get it because it's a Pi, but on hardware systems specifically, this is not so important for VMs or Pis. but on a hardware platform, it'll collect the motherboard information. So it'll get the BIOS version and all that kind of information, but it requires root access. So that's the only thing that requires root. And so in order to avoid having to run as root all the time, if you just run this code once, it dumps that dmidecode file in the non-root directory. So it gets the metadata. You just have to run it once. And then you can rerun the script and it'll populate from there. It'll pick up that metadata about the motherboard. And so you'll see that show up here under the hardware column. So it's detecting the Windows guest as a KVM client, but like gigabyte. So here's a gigabyte motherboard that we're running. The Raspberry Pi model detection is easy. That doesn't require root permissions. Here's another hardware whoops. Sorry, my scroll's not working well. Another hardware motherboard, a couple SIYD systems. Oh, those are my Proxmox servers. And so that script is what's needed in order to run that. So I forgot to mention that earlier, but that's the only thing that you have. If you want that extra metadata, you have to run that as root once. Otherwise, the script runs as a non-administrative user. So one of the things you would want to do if you wanted to really install it would be to set up a non-root user to run it as on your systems. You may already have that. But you know, just to collect data, you can do it as any user. So anybody who's logged in with a non-admin account can just run it, collect the data, send it to the server, and you've got it. If you just need to do a quick and dirty inventory.
This is Jasmine. Maybe this is obvious and I just missed it, but if one of these computers is powered off, how would that show up on here?
It won't necessarily detect it, and it wouldn't show up at all unless you could say, hey, this system hasn't been inventoried in 3 months. And
right.
So then that might give you a note, oh, hey, where is it at? Why haven't I seen it? Where did it go? Is it powered on? But it's not intended to be a status monitor of system uptime or anything like that. That is not a feature technically built into this tool.
Okay, thank you.
No, good question.
Don, is the tool able to report that itself is if the client itself is up to date on the system?
So is it the latest version of the ITAM software?
Yes.
Not yet. I have thoughts about that, but it is not yet doing that. So in other words, like, how do you know if there's a new version out there? And so, yeah, it's on my to-do list.
Oh, I mean, not if there's a new version at the GitHub. I mean, does the Asset Manager client show up in the list of packages that are up to date? Because maybe
no, it does. No, it does not.
That'd be cool.
Because it's a good thing to add. So right now it's collecting data from Windows system packages, the system profiler in Macs, apt and yum from Linux. There's other package managers out there though that I would like to get data for, like npm for node packages. I would love to be able, but that's complicated because you can do it within a directory. It doesn't have to be installed system wide. Python packages, pip, that's another one I'd like to get. There's one, I think it's called Flatpak, which is a new Linux package manager. So I'd like to be able to track Flatpak packages if people are using Linux. I haven't done any Arch Linux or other Linuxes like that. So those would all be potentially things to add. BSD would be a potential platform. I don't know how much BSD is being used. And I don't have support for other Linuxes. I ran into one the other day. I installed Kali Linux. And it broke because it didn't know what Kali Linux was. So I really just need to spin up a bunch of test platforms and go do it. The one that has been problematic and Chris ran into is I only have one Mac test system here that I have access to. And I have a few on Sikuliaq. So I did find that there's nuances between the different Mac distributions. The system profiler doesn't know about all the different profiles I'm trying to load. So there, as the versions change, the system profiler, what data is available there changes, and so I I really probably could use some help from people who have a lot of different Macs or Mac versions to do it. One thing I did think of adding too, that's kind of related to your question, is if we were to have a global or a system running on the internet that you could populate your metadata about packages, kind of anonymized data, we could then know about what are the latest versions of software packages out there. And so you could get the relative metric of scoring from that, and that could be crowdsourced from the internet. But it would need to be anonymized because we don't want to tie computer names to software packages and things like that. So that, could be done, and it would obviously be an opt-in option you could choose not to do. That would be kind of cool because then we could get a wide distribution of what's running out there. It does.
Okay, John,
Yep,
my,
yeah, go ahead, Toby. Yeah.
My box finally just created its JSON file.
Finished?
What am I
Okay.
supposed to do with it?
Well, let's just go rerun this and see if it didn't break anything. So we'll come to the, I got to go to the right one. Let's go to here. We've got 6 systems now. And if I go, it looks like it's an Ubuntu system, maybe, Toby?
Yes.
And system 76 PC. All right, how about that? And so it's a hardware system, probably not a VM.
Correct.
Yep.
Oh, and so when you do the hardware detection, I'm assuming, is that using something like LSHW or?
No, it's using dmidecode. So let me see if I can find that.
Which is probably where LSHW gets its info
It
from.
could be. And there may be better ways to do this too. I've just taken a smattering of things and written like custom code to go grab that metadata. And then I try to put it into kind of unified package metadata. So like package name, version, install date, general fields for that, whether it's a Windows, Mac, or Linux package of software. I try to do that and do the same thing kind of for hardware. So the data comes from a lot of different places. Like the Raspberry Pi information is very custom to Pis. So it goes to see if that file's there, and if it is, then it loads it. Okay, so find dot, I think, was it DM, it's DMID code. There we go. Let's just take a look at this thing. I don't think it's very big. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing on the hardware side to get the data. So it's passing that to dmidecode-s, and then it parses through a number of different fields to get that, and then sends it out. So that's the script that's running to collect the hardware data on the hardware side.
Hey, John, have you, maybe you covered, I was a little bit late and then, but have you tried to then kind of go and look at like a list of vulnerabilities and then seems like that would be
I
like
haven't, but
best
I
use
want
case.
well, okay, so I've gotten started on that. I don't have a link for it. There is I think they're called CVEs.
Yeah, see, right.
So there's a CVE database, and there's a way to actually run a CVE database clone server locally.
Oh shit, that's cool.
So you could like, I'll have to go dig up the information on this. Where do I have? I might have it. It's probably in my notes here somewhere. Yeah, I do have it. All right. Actually, so here's a great guy to talk to, apparently. David Waltermeyer at NIST.gov. I've not contacted him, but he is the contact for this stuff. And my takeaway is this CVE database thing is, Not, I mean, it's a resource, but it's not accurate and up to date all the time. And it's kind of really hard to figure out, you know, what to do about this vulnerability. But there is prior work. There's a lot of prior work here. In fact, I'm trying to remember I tell you what I'll just do. I'll just copy and paste this entire notes thing I have into the chat if anybody wants it. So I started researching it, and these are just some links from the notes I had related to this. So there's the CVE tools, OpenSCAP. I think this might be the one. I'm trying to remember. But what I wanted to do is basically turn that into a server to then associate known software package versions with vulnerabilities to kind of tie that in. Yeah, the OpenSCAP database. I think this is it. So you can download this and install it. Haven't gotten that far yet. And while we're at it, another thing that I want to do is it's called Snipe It. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Snipe It. So it's an open source asset manager, and they have a demo that you can run in a web browser. I've installed it once or twice. Oh yeah, the demo has a login. It's admin password. Awesome. And so it's backended by a MySQL database. What I want to do is take the data that I collect from my tool and just ingest it right into this asset manager. And so it has the ability to track licenses, assets, hardware assets, accessories. You can do custom fields, set up manufacturers. So the problem is you really have to organize the schema in here, and that's installing it's easy, relatively easy. It's just a LAMP app with a nice web interface. But figuring out how to use it and how to organize your assets is the trick. So I wanted to take a stab at that and figure out how to pre-populate this, and then use this as the web interface to actually get metadata on my assets and track them, and then be able to edit manually information about them. But that's also something that I haven't gotten around to yet. But again, Snipe It is an open source, you know, asset management tool. It looks like it has a lot of promise, but here's the thing. I haven't done this wrong yet, so I don't know how to do it right. Asset management is definitely complicated. What do you consider to be an asset? Is it a physical asset? Is it a virtual asset? Is it a database itself is an asset? So you might have databases of information that you need to track as a digital asset and restrict access to. So that's definitely down the road. That's where I would love to integrate some of these things together. That would be awesome. So I kind of touched on it, Chris, but I haven't really gotten around to that yet.
Well, it's a great, I mean, now when I get the email, right, CVE, whatever, you're got to patch your Oracle stuff every other day.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You can at least find out quickly who has it.
Yep, and so I would love to have a list of all those vulnerabilities. Mike, the thing that I'm concerned about is how accurate is that information?
Yeah.
And I don't know, that would be a great study for somebody at Trusted CI to do or something, right? To actually do some kind of.
Yeah, that could be something that could help us with.
Yep. How useful is it? Because it's a lot of work to do if you want to integrate it. But if it's really helpful, great. But if it's not accurate, then it's not really helping much. Yep. All right. Well, we're coming up on the hour. I'm happy to stick around if there's other questions or other things folks want to try.
I'll just let you know there's one more finally up there.
Okay. Let's go ReRunner. Let's see, it might have already been. I just reload. There we go. We got two
Ooh,
more.
looks like there's two more. Yeah.
Neat. All right, good deal. All right, so we've got a CentOS 7 system that got added.
Yeah, that's mine.
Yep. And I can also
Score,
see
too.
I can also see the IP information that system thinks it has, which is internal, so which is not really a security issue, but so we could now go look at stats maybe.
That one hasn't been updated for a while. We'll be interested to see how that shows up.
So we see our distribution of OSs and install dates. So one was installed in 2016. All right. And in terms of systems, we have got some here that are a little out of date or aging. So I will say this, the color coding and the categorization of what is, you know, out of date versus up to date versus excellent is totally subjective on my part with this kind of quasi metric that I've come up with to give us a relative index. The risk of that is that people will interpret it to be authoritative, but you know, just because it says your system isn't patched and updated doesn't mean it's true.
You explain that as a reference just to like your most up to date. Is that what it is?
Correct. Yep. So that's just because it was what was easy to do,
Yeah.
right? I can go install Windows system, inventory it, patch it and update it, re-inventory it, and say, hey, I'm up to date there. How does everything else compare to it? And that's not hard. That was the low hanging fruit. Trying to figure out where each of these packages come from and what's the latest version. I have no idea how to do that. I might be able to do it for a Debian distribution or something like that, but it's really hard.
Well, some of that is eye of the beholder as well. I mean, you know, if you go out and get an old distribution, and so the latest package that runs on that, you may be running it, but that doesn't tell you that that's an old package and it's still security holes.
So it would take some work, but it might be possible to tweak this to give you like the overall index and to give a per distribution index. So just compare your host to other hosts with the same distribution version.
I mean, does it make sense to ask the local package manager if the system is currently up to date with its current distribution? And that's, I think, mostly what you care about. And then at the gross scale, where you have the wrap, where you can compare whether or not you have the latest distribution. And that's
exactly, yeah.
So you don't want it, right?
You need to know what your baseline is. Yeah. Yep.
I wouldn't try to duplicate what the package manager is doing, at least in Linux.
No, I'm not trying to. No, I wouldn't try and do that either. Yeah, the idea is to use the tools that exist, not write too many complicated layers on top of it. So another project I started about a month ago, and I spent a weekend on it, but I didn't get it running. Is I have a similar type application to this running on Linux systems, and it monitors the processes that are running. And then it does an LSOF on the processes to find out every file that each process is using. And then figures out what packages installed those files so that I can do a chain of custody of known source for all processes that are running and all the packages, and quickly identify if there's any processes running that are running software that I don't know where it came from. And then just continually monitor my Linux system for, hey, all of a sudden this process started up and is running and I don't know where it came from. And so just to give me a dashboard of that for Linux and collect that metadata. So I still want to finish that project, but I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Like that Bitcoin miner on my file server a few years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine that. Yeah. And so there's all kinds of software that can run from all kinds of sources that I'm not going to track here at all because it's not installed with an RPM package or a deb package. That's definitely a weakness.
So this is kind of a left field to what we're talking about, and maybe it's a question for, is anyone interested enough in this to talk about it between now and the next RVTEC? I think I mentioned that NOAA is pushing for us to become Stig compliant.
And what is? Do you have a link to that, Toby? Right. I don't mean to interrupt. Sorry. Go ahead. I'll wait till you're done. Go ahead.
Yes, and the links to the Stig stuff change far too frequently. And since it's a national military cybersecurity concept, you'd think they wouldn't change as often as they do. But at least the last time I looked at it, the change was for the much better. Anyway, security Stig, ST, technical guidelines, guideline. And each distribution, each computer model has Stig recommendations by the Defense Cyber Exchange. And this stuff just goes way down into the weeds. It's like, what does your login look like, and how long is your timeout on your screensaver, and all of that sort of stuff. But it gives you the command and what to check against, and there's like 300 checks. And before Tamal left us, he actually wrote a little package that we were trying to do so that we could define. It was a call and response sort of thing where we would write in what the Stig check was and copy its command, and then give what according to the Stig what the response was supposed to be, and it would go out and do those checks and give you a yes or no. And since Tamal has left, that has actually fallen by the wayside, but we really need to revitalize it. And I'm just wondering if anybody else is running up against these sorts of guidelines. I mean, this session has been something totally different. I don't know that any of the Stig stuff would be included in this session.
So are you referring to essentially an automated Stig
checker
checklist?
Yeah, and he wrote it as a Python that he tried to make it generic. We obviously don't test this stuff on Windows machines and whatnot. So there's two parts to it, of course. There's the actual engine that Tamal had written, and then there's the populating all the Stig rules. And the first part pass on the populating of the Stig rules was attempted to be automated, but that just didn't work.
Yeah.
I find this very interesting. These days, I'm not sailing on oceanographic ships, but I'm teaching at the Coast Guard Academy, where they're very much concerned with this sort of stuff.
Yes.
Cyber systems program, and our cyber team cadets, for instance, might be really interested in having a plausible reason to think about automating Stigs.
Well, and the interesting thing is that there are a number of for-pay packages, for-pay from corporations which cater to the defense agency. So they're all expensive and complicated and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, what we were, our first response was, oh, we'll just check our base install against the Stig by hand and say we're good enough. But I really wanted to be able to just go out and drop this on a machine and run it against that machine at any point in time.
So I can demo something for you here, Toby, that might help. I'm in the process of working on a shoreside set of clusters, or cluster for Sikuliaq, and I've got this bunch of sandbox systems in this Proxmox server over here. And so on top of the cluster, what I built is an Ansible configuration that sits in a Git repository. So I can come in, I have a playbook template, and so everything is kind of templated, and I can organize by data center for systems in the sandbox, on the ship, or the shore networks. And so if I go into my sandbox, I'll see I've got a number of different systems defined. There's also in Ansible this host file. And so the devil's in the details, but basically you can come in and configure exactly what packages are installed, what configuration files are installed, what firewall settings are installed, what user accounts are installed. And so I can go run a command like this, and it's going to pull the latest updates from the Git server. And then it's going to go run on all the hosts in the cluster and make sure they're up to date with the defined config.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with Stig.
Well, it does, because all the Stig requirements that you want to make sure are set, you can build into your config to harden those systems.
It would be really nice if you didn't have to do that by hand. And actually, Toby, I'm familiar with several of those tools. Some of them I know are the ones you're talking about that are expensive and highly customized. And I'm thinking of one of them called, I think it's called Evaluate Stig. I'm going to find out if it's available to the community. That's the only one I'm not sure about the pay structure for.
Thank you.
So you don't think we could use something like Ansible or Puppet to do infrastructure as code?
Well, so you are coming at it from the other direction, and I'm. So what you're doing is you're saying force everything to become Stig compliant by the configurations being pre-Stig compliant, and I'm trying to look at it from the other direction, saying, what is this system? Because we don't have this level of access to the machines. For instance, on the NOAA machines, sure, we could probably use a configurator. But a whole bunch of these, well, even on the NOAA machines, they're not ours, they're somebody else's. And us going and having that level of control is kind of.
So so if you don't have access to the OS, you can't really check.
We typically do have access to the OS.
Okay.
But us making wholesale changes like that. So, okay, and you'll understand this. One of our base concepts is we never change any configuration things at sea unless it's just a simple UHDAS configuration because something is broken. But we never change a system level.
Great policy. Well, I think it is a good policy today, but it's probably going to be a problem in the future, because what could happen is you might wind up with, just in general, maybe not for UHDAS, but as other software gets identified vulnerabilities, those actually could become a risk during a 30-day cruise, and we have to figure out how to keep systems patched and updated more frequently than that. So we probably need the ability to patch and update systems. 5 years from now, we need to be able to be doing that daily on board ships.
But in order to do that patch and update, you actually have to have more than access to that machine. You have to have access to that ship.
Yeah, you need bandwidth to move the payload.
Well, and that patch and access, I'm not sure about, what Puppet and all those do in terms of what happens because it failed in the middle because the network went out.
So what I'm doing with this Ansible config is I have one server that pushes out these configs, and it is a Squid proxy server for the updates. So I can download apt package updates once, and every other client pulls from the proxy server, not from
the proxy server on ship?
On the ship.
See,
yep.
So you
only
just
have
said
to
there are
pull it
two
over the
machines
internet
on the
once.
ship.
Say again?
You've just said that I have two machines on the ship. I've got the Ansible server and the machine I'm trying to update at the very least.
Right. So the Ansible is only working on a subset of systems that are Ansibleized, right? So they've got to be set up to work with that. And so it doesn't necessarily mean everything, but I guess I don't know enough about the Stig stuff. So am I at least on the right page here?
Bear in mind that Stigs break things, so now you need a tech on the ship.
That would be a bad place to be. to have
That's
it
what-
break things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think.
So where would I go to learn more about Stig? Am I on the right
Well,
website?
yeah, you were earlier.
Okay. Back here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sarah, is that hold it? Well, yeah.
Yeah,
probably
that's the starting spot.
Okay. I'll have to spend some more time learning about it. I mean, I'm very much interested because I think it overlaps with a lot of the cybersecurity stuff we're doing.
Well, it's all about security, but it's from a weird point of view.
It sounds
It's
a lot
it's
like
a compliance model.
it sounds like a set of controls, and it's a compliance model. Yeah.
And it's designed for enterprise scale homogeneous networks.
Yeah. And so this is NOAA's using this, and
Well, it's obviously Sarah knows more about it than I do. Coast Guard's using it, but it's a defense model.
yeah, which a lot of those things, in my opinion, are not well thought out or not informed. So there's a lot of old cybersecurity practices being applied that are really not very useful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, many of them are great, but there's not they're not designed for networks like ours. A lot of the standards are effective and useful, have been good for us. But
yes. So these sys controls,
flexibility.
the sys control, security controls, is the one that Trusted CI is interested in using for the Trusted CI framework. That's their recommendation. And so you can get the guide and pull it from here. I'll just put this in the chat.
Most networks are
yeah
heterogeneous and full of legacy systems that are hard to and risky to upgrade. I think renew infrastructure, building to spec sounds great, but it seems like you'll unlikely ever get 100% of the way there, at least not soon.
So what's happening with us is we have a system that we control embedded within a NOAA, call it a military network. And since we control it, we're the ones who have to provide the compliance. And every machine on this network is supposed to be compliant with the STIGs. And no, we don't have access to any other machines on the ship. So I don't have a place to stand to be pushing updates.
But as a vendor or service provider, you have to be compliant with it, or they won't let you put it on the ship.
Yeah, and you know, there's things like I mean, you've seen UH-. Runs by you turn it on and you click on the GUI, and then that GUI runs constantly, and it's both monitoring configuration and all that sort of stuff. Well, we get dinged by the STIG all the time because there's a user that doesn't time out.
Okay. So there's no session timeout for sessions.
Well, there's no, specifically, there's no desktop timeout. If someone's walked away from the keyboard and hasn't typed something on the keyboard in the last, and the STIG specifically states something like 5 minutes, then the desktop is supposed to go into screensaver and lock.
So that's the desktop of the UH- server.
Yes.
Yep. So you would have to configure it to do that. So that's the kind of thing you can Ansible-ize. Or
That's showing all these graphs, so you don't ever want to with that.
Yeah, you can't make your monitor disappear.
I see. Because oh yeah, I see your point.
So
You
Toby,
want a
curious,
dashboard.
is there any possibility you could basically break UH-DAS into a server client model where the server would run the daemon?
Okay, now we're getting into a whole different discussion.
Okay. Right.
I mean, we are talking about changing the application.
Yeah.
So let me put it this way. In the UH-DAS environment, the word refactor is spelled with 4 letters.
I feel your pain, Toby.
Well, clearly you're maintaining an application that's rife with security concerns, Toby.
Well, that is actually clearly true. Except for most of those security concerns have to do with, oh, look, the keyboard's not locked.
So you just need an exception, Toby.
Well, and that's true also, but I can't ask for exceptions until I know where I'm not compliant.
Right, which is why you need to, so your original statement was you need to
Compliance
phone in
checker.
every once in a while and do an audit.
I might know a possible solution for you. So you're familiar with X terms?
Yeah.
If you had a dual-headed server, you could send one X term with the display to one video port, okay? That disables the keyboard and mouse. All it does is show a dashboard, but there's no way for anybody to control it. And then that would be the output of that video stream. And then on another video port, different HDMI port, whatever, display port, whatever, that would be your administrative console that requires a login and could have a timeout.
Well, as Webb was about to suggest, by far and away, the vast majority of the monitoring stuff is all web pages. As a matter of fact, you can see more on the, with the exception of the streaming input from the serial ports, there are more monitoring features available via the web than via the GUI.
That speaks to the client server model, and that's a better option then.
And really, what we need to do is we need to make a control interface, a web accessible control interface. And then we can lock the keyboard. But you know, that's something we don't have the people, we don't have the time, and we don't have the inclination. Now, back in something like '06, when UHDAS was installed on Wacoma, I looked at Jules and Eric and said, what do you mean you have to be running a GUI in order to run your data acquisition system? And their response was, oh, everything is going this way. And I've been fighting this since '06. Now, I only started working for him since 15.
I totally agree with that, Toby. It's nuts. You don't.
Well, you've been working for him almost as long as when you told them to make the change and you weren't working for them.
Yeah. Oh, it's getting there. And interestingly, a couple of years ago, this specific thing came back and bit them because people are wanting to put on headless UHDAS systems. And they had to go, as I refer to it, as they had to put another layer of Band-Aids on top of the pile of Band-Aids that they've got right now.
Yeah. Man, I can think of a long list of reasons why you would want to run a headless server.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
And-
Toby,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just, I'm concerned for Toby's mental health, and I wanted to just, if it would help him feel any better, to remind him that there are some actual subsea pressure vessel instruments go down on ROVs that actually have full Windows GUI controls and have to be controlled that way, and no, they don't pass virus scans when they want to get on.
So misery loves company has never been one of my favorite things. But thank you. Yes, there are things that we can do in our code to make things more compliant. There are things that we can do in our usage model to make things more compliant. But the huge first step is to figure out where we are compliant already and where we are not compliant. And thus I want a compliance checker.
Yep.
But it sounds like Sarah might be the only other one who has to worry about Stigs.
And Sarah, what's your context for that? Like, what's
well, these are Coast Guard government systems. Our entire network is a government system. So the DISA CCRI standard applies to us.
I wonder how this is impacted by CMMC, because my understanding is DoD is pushing for CMMC.
I'm really not familiar with CMMC. I'm going to have to do some research on that. It has not come around in our environment.
It is. So this SatNIG site, I'm trying to put some cybersecurity things here, and I'm going to add Stig to it because I don't know about that one till today, which is why we do these kind of meetings. But this CMMC is a cybersecurity maturity model certification. There are 5 layers to it. So for layer 1 to layer 5, you become more secure as you go. In fact, if I just pull up their document, I think you can get a gist for it. And so we are looking at trying to get to layer 1. So they've got these different layers. It's basic cyber hygiene. And then good cyber hygiene is where you're actually managing everything and, ensuring it. So this would basically be like an asset management assessment at level 1. What do you know all your assets are? Are they patched and updated? Basic things. And we're just trying to get to that. Each one has a different number of controls. And so I don't know if that's listed in here specifically. I know level 1 has 17 controls. And I think when you get to level 5, you're doing, something like a couple hundred controls or something.
I think level 3 has about 300.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but the 17 controls for level 1, I actually put together I can share this out. I put together a spreadsheet template for CMMC compliance. So let me go get that if folks are interested. Checklist template. And so these are the 17 controls, and so you can go through and mark whether or not you're up to date with them if you want. And so I'll share that link out in the chat. If you want to clone the template, you're welcome to have it. And so this is for CMMC level 1, but it gets you just a gist of what they're talking about. So if I scroll down to this control, control information posted or processed on public accessible information systems. So individuals authorized to post or process information on public systems are identified, yes or no. So we could go through and assess ourselves on each of those points. So that's basically the checklist to know whether or not you're CMMC level 1 compliant. And then what you would have to do to get to each of these is a whole nother can of worms. But that's the introduction to CMMC level 1, as best I understand it. And we're having to do this at the University of Alaska, and they're going to use the NIST 800 framework to do that. So I'm having to work in multiple frameworks for multiple compliance regimes. So because the DoD is done at the institution level, because it's the institution that accepts DoD contracts, we're having to go to CMMC. So I'm really surprised to hear that you have a different DoD framework you're having to use with a different set of controls. That's surprising to me. And this hasn't come up at all in our last year's worth of discussion with the Navy or ONR or DoD. I haven't heard of this one at all. So that's really interesting to me.
It was only CMMC really for us.
Yeah, it's kind of like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
And this surprises you. I'm surprised at your surprise.
Yeah, what a pain in the ass.
Right. Well, and we have the DFARS to start.
Yeah, we started with DFARS, and that's a great point, Ken, is DFARS kind of evolved into, that was the focus all at once. And then basically people said, yeah, don't worry about that. Just focus on this. Yeah.
Yeah, last time I looked, the Stig, the Stig for Ubuntu was actually Ubuntu 16.08. No, 16.10, I think. And each Stig actually has to get approved before it can get published. So when I was looking at this, I started looking at this a couple of years ago. Well, when I first started, there was no no Ubuntu approval. There was just a Red Hat one and a couple of Debian ones. So, you know, the first part of the Stig is, oh, you need to be running this operating system and this version. And I know for a fact that, you know, we're on the wrong version number. And you, for instance, have to apply for an exception to that.
My biggest problem with this is it is a intractable technical debt problem to actually be compliant.
Yes.
It's impossible to actually meet it. And you just spend all your time jumping through hoops and not actually doing meaningful things to improve cybersecurity. And that's also why I keep pushing this trusted CI framework, because it's very pragmatic. These are their 16 controls. And I think they're way more, I mean, some of them are still high bars, but they're way more pragmatic to meet than complicated frameworks like some of the NIST stuff, which is really just bureaucracy. But at the end of the day, if you try to, you know, you might be compliant with these frameworks, but if you can't keep track of it all, you're still going to have vulnerabilities and you're still going to get hacked. Yeah, man, I definitely, I'll have to learn more about Stig.
Well, if nobody else is doing it, then I won't bother bringing it up to RVTEC anymore.
Well, I'm waiting for this shoe to drop. As things do, and we always want to try to get ahead of them. So Toby, I'll definitely be bringing this up with Research SOC and seeing if they have any knowledge of it or familiarity or guidance. And they might be a resource to you as well.
Okay.
And so if I'll ask the question, see where it goes. I'll try to send information to you and Sarah as we find out anything. I'm sorry, say again.
I think Tony's just not muted.
Oh, okay.
That was happening earlier. Anyway.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, and if this is something that we do need to be more broadly concerned about, then we should have some effort on it.
I am betting that we don't.
I think
Yeah, the rest of y'all are not federal government networks.
Right.
So I suspect the CMMC is more applicable.
I hope
We're,
so.
we're government, NOAA is government, possibly NSF. Do we have any, is Scott on this call? Do we have anybody from the USAP? Yeah, I suspect we're the minority here.
So there is a broader effort happening. I don't think I have it linked into my site yet. Does NSF have? Yeah, there's a thing called JASON. It's JASON, and it was a study that was done, and NSF is looking at it to potentially have a overarching cybersecurity framework for all NSF major facilities. At which point they might try to implement something like this across the fleet.
Yeah, that might.
We won't fall under the radar of NSF. Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
No, I was going to say, yeah, that might well apply to us.
Yep,
And,
but we don't have actionable information on that. We just know it's going on, and Trusted CI is involved with that. So the good news is we won't, going the Research SOC route kind of sets us up as best we can right now anyway, to be in the loop on that action. But I could see something like this classifying us as, you know, federal networks, right? It's not inconceivable.
It's not inconceivable. It's true. Yeah, and it's very much a work in progress. You know, for those that haven't been involved in the cybersecurity adventures for the fleet the past year, we went with CMMC level 1 because that seems like the right thing to do, and all the DoD framework is set up for level 3. They're not actually set up for level 1, and so it remains to be seen whether they'll do that or whether they'll want us to go further or do something completely different, as John was just mentioning. It's very much a work in progress.
Yep. And Ken, you're more impacted by that than I am because you've got an ONR ship.
Right.
I haven't really been involved in that discussion, so.
Yeah, so we're supposed to register in the
Spears, SPRS.
Spears, yeah, in the SPRS, but we can't because they don't they haven't implemented that for level 1, only for level 3.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So the word for a while was that maybe in 6 months they'll have it, but then the last I heard was, well, they're really encouraging everybody to go to level 3, so maybe they won't.
You don't have
Who
any
knows?
resources or like a web page that cites that or a citation for that information? do you?
No, that was just
A comment.
yeah, that was
Well,
from what's his name from Peregrine.
I got to pass that on to our CISO. Was that Lee?
No, that was drawing a blank on his name.
Ryder?
The guy that just does those things.
Oh, yeah. Doctor, what's his name? I forget his name.
I will come up
Yeah.
with his name in a minute, but yeah.
Okay. Well, that came up to us. So UAF has submitted SPRS registrations, but it's been pending. So they've been waiting for why it hasn't been accepted yet. And
Oh, interesting.
that could very well be the reason that
It
they
could
don't
be.
have it for level 1 yet.
If they're only shooting for level 1, that could well be it. So
Yeah.
what I was told was that there was no point in registering yet because we would be, we have the 17 controls, but we'd be measured against the 100 or 300 or whatever the number is for level 3 and have a really, really low score. And then they'd want a date for when you're going to come to full compliance with that higher bar. So there was no point, was what we were told. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I need a quick break. We've still got a half hour. I'll leave it up if folks, conversation seems to be good, so we can keep it going. And if anybody has any, I think we're kind of done with the IT Asset Manager, and this has kind of evolved into a good cybersecurity discussion.
Yes.
So I'll leave it up. I'll be back in a few minutes. But
Mike Chipley, that was his name.
Yes, Mike Chipley. Yep. All right. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Well, thanks, John.
I think I'll take advantage of the same break. Sarah, are you still out there?
All right, I'm back.
Still on the participant list, but I don't know that she's returned yet.
Well, she might have wandered off to use the same facilities everyone else was. So I do have an interesting comment about the whole Stig thing. Up until about a year ago, in order to actually find the Stig rules, you had to have a CAT card and be using a government-owned computer to get to them.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to ask about that relationship between identity management and compliance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of understand that there might be some sensitive controls, but I kind of would hope those would be separated out from the non-sensitive ones so that you can help. The standard shouldn't have sensitive information in it.
I think that this community would be pretty well, with a few caveats, be pretty well insulated from whatever level of requirements would require a unified identity management compliance as well, because, I mean, well, the cost of coming into compliance with that for most academic institutions would be incredibly high. Not that it's not a good idea, but the disconnected nature of these networks is challenging.
Yep. I think the entire like firewall model that we're using, where you have inside and outside boundaries, is like totally broken from a cybersecurity point of view these days. There are so many things that can punch holes in firewalls and applications that transit that boundary. You know, there's all these stun turn services that, like Zoom, like what we're doing right now, right, does not, it totally transits boundaries. If I can initiate my connection from the inside out, you're sending me data to my internal network and my firewall's not checking that at all. Yeah.
Well, any of the VPN stuff, you know, Skype was one of the first big offenders for this.
Quick question. I just need a confirmation. Now that we've finished with the IT asset management, would we like to take this offline? Should I stop recording, streaming?
I'm fine with that, Randy. I
Sure.
think that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay.